Hello and welcome to the Business Today show. I'm your host Udayan Mukherjee. We started off this series with the promise that we'll speak to one outstanding individual from the world of business every week. And the focus will be on enterprise. Indeed, in the first episode of the show, we spoke to Baiju Ravindran, who's the owner of India's largest unicorn today and the world's largest education technology company. But it would be a mistake to think that enterprise and entrepreneurship is only the preserve of 30-year-old and 40-year-old unicorn owners. In fact, the poster boy of Indian enterprise and entrepreneurship is actually the world's richest banker. He's the CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank, Uday Kotak, who over 35 years has built one of the most valuable banking franchises in the world, one of the most efficient and admired banks, through a series of acquisitions down the years. And he is really a role model for all unicorns in this country. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome on this show today, Uday Kotak. Uday, it's great talking to you again and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Udayan. Great to get you back from the hills. And as I understand now, from the hills, you've gone to London.
I am indeed. So getting a taste of the British summer, Uday, but I'm sure I'll keep coming back to India. But it's good to talk to you again. And there's always so much to talk to you about, the state of the economy, the state of the markets, banking. But I really want to start today's show by asking you about the one story which I've always thought about discussing with you but never got the chance to. Is that incident on the cricket field, which apparently turned the course of your life from being potentially a cricketer to the world's richest banker. I mean, you could have been Rishabh Pant, but you're Uday Kotak today. But can you tell our audiences about that incident?
Udayan, it goes back a long time ago. I must say my biggest claim to fame, as I often say, is the fact that my coach, when I was in school, was Ramakant Achrekar, and who later on, as we all know, became the coach of Sachin Tendulkar. So that is one of my biggest satisfactions of having learned from that coach, and thereafter was passionate about cricket. And I was playing a cricket match, the Kanga League match at the Azad Maidan, Fort Vijay grounds. And I was running between the wickets, and a fielder from short extra cover hit the ball, trying to hit the stumps, but hit my head. And I had to be operated upon in the next few hours. I had lost consciousness, and it was a remarkable surgery. This was in 1979 when I was barely 20 years old. And that was a turning point in my life. And from then on, life changed towards more a professional career, particularly an entrepreneurial journey shortly began thereafter.
Well, it's a remarkable story, but how serious was your talent to there? Because, do you think you could have gone on to play at maybe state levels or even the national level if had that incident not happened?
One never knows where things take you in the future. All that I know is I was very passionate about cricket, and I did play at the college level for sure. And Kanga League was the game you play in the rainy season, which actually improves your technology and technique in cricket. They say a lot of Mumbai cricketers do well because they are able to play in the mushy rains and wet pitches. So I would not say that I would have necessarily become a test cricketer or not, but I was very passionate about cricket.
Do you feel wistful sometimes when you see the new Indian team play? I mean, just a few days back, there was a famous victory at Lord's.
No, it's always great.
Can you imagine a young Uday Kotak being part of that team? Does it make you feel wistful?
No, I miss sports. I've given up cricket. I've given up music because I used to play the sitar, and that's something too. In the pursuit of business and enterprise, this is the price I have paid, but it's a price which has been consciously paid because you have to make the choices. And I played sitar as a hobby also for many years, but then it became very tough to keep up with it.
I can imagine how busy your life is, but it's so interesting to hear. I mean, your passion for sport and music, because sometimes people have this impression that bankers are essentially boring people. But you were a serious cricketer. You played sitar for many years, and that's more than a lot of people can actually fit into such busy lives. But I mean, taking off from there, I want to ask you. I mean, there is so much of enterprise and entrepreneurship in your blood that today, when you see these unicorns who are probably compressing your 35-year journey to a 10-year journey, and they're being valued at billions of dollars, do you sometimes feel the itch again to do something like that, to try an Uday Kotak 2.0 and maybe start a digital enterprise and do what some of these younger entrepreneurs are doing today?
Udayan, the future is looking even brighter than my last 35 years journey. And why do I say that? I think COVID in many ways has reignited planet Earth. It has set off a whole new journey of opportunities and compressed 5 years or 10 years into 1 year. Therefore, you are now looking at the world from a very different lens today than you looked at in the past. And one of the things you learn as you grow is never look at the rear view mirror. Always look at the windshield in front of you when you're driving the car. And I feel very excited to see a traditional financial services business like what Kotak has been historically work towards transformation and embrace into the new world. There are advantages of what we have built, but it's even more important not to be complacent about the success of the past and quickly grasp the change ahead of us. And if you ask me, that makes me very excited, not necessarily because of all the knowledge which I may or may not actually have of this new technology world. But most important aspect about knowledge is not necessarily knowing it all, but knowing where you can get knowledge. And the second and the most important point is thinking from the lens of the customer. What does the customer want? And if we can get that, everything else can be put in place. Therefore, I'm excited for all the new entrepreneurs. I wish them great luck and great support in their journey. I actually feel very young and motivated myself when I see their successes. I wish they go far ahead than what the historical Indian entrepreneurs had been. That is the future. You have to grow, you're going to scale. But at the same time, it sort of motivates people like us to embrace the change which is a part of our lives. And I'm very excited. I see the journey ahead even more exciting than the 35 years which I've been through.
Well, there's a lot to talk about that journey, Uday. But since you mentioned young entrepreneurs, I want to ask you if you had to impart a sense of knowledge or learning from the last 3 decades to them, because everyone will look up to you. I mean, what you've achieved over the last 3 decades, these young people. But if you had to tell them on reflection, what would you say is the one ingredient that has really been instrumental in your success? I mean, your secret sauce, if you will. What would you tell them?
My view is as you go down the creative journey of creating things, making things happen, experiment, all that is wonderful. But always keep in mind that the key to success is how quickly an entrepreneur can also embrace what I call as professionalism. And I think the success for sustained success is what I call as a professional entrepreneur. An entrepreneur at heart and at work, but combined with professionalism. Many creative people are able to start something, even build it up to a point. But when it comes to scaling and sustaining over long periods of time, that's where the challenge comes. And as a result of which, if there are 100 players in the game, finally one or two or three really make it, because somewhere along the way, they'll run the risk of taking a shortcut, faltering on execution, and that's what they should be very conscious about. Therefore, go out there, have that spirit of enterprise, experiment, create, but have a solid framework of professionalism, ensuring that you're always within the framework of law of the land. And when the law is gray, work all out to get it right, at least in spirit, which is extremely important for the future.
Wise words, Uday. I'm sure entrepreneurs will take this lesson from you. But you alluded just now to how quickly the financial landscape is changing in front of our eyes, and maybe the process of change has got compressed, maybe to a much shorter time frame. And there's no better example of how this is happening with the embracing of digital payment systems and the way the world of finance is evolving. But do you think that banks as we know it will be able to retain their primacy in the financial pyramid given how quickly everything is getting digital? I mean, a lot of people would now be thinking of a bank as a mobile wallet which they're carrying in their pockets. They don't need a brick and mortar bank. Do you think banks like yours and banking generally will be able to embrace and rise to this challenge?
I think we've got to think about the world from two perspectives in the context of financial services. One is a very surgical customer in approach, not a product out approach. Oh, I make this product. I provide home loans. I think that is something which we need to move away from. We need to focus on what is it that the customer wants and how can we provide the uh, needs of what the customer requires. And that is where I think getting to a customer centricity, including a platform play, is one very important aspect of the future. Customer in at all points of time. And the second big one in financial services, and I think hugely important, is what I call as trust and risk management. We are managing other people's money, and it takes very little to lose trust. And therefore, I would say the two key things for the future are a customer centricity to the extent of customer wow, combined with outstanding risk management, which will be build financial services of the future, whether you call it a bank or otherwise.
But do you see a huge threat from all these payment wallets? And because even in the West, the same discourse is playing out. People are asking questions on why not PayPal? Why a bank? Or do you think the whole notion of banking might actually undergo a sea change, which we cannot see today? Because these days, the rate of change of technological processes is actually so fast that within 2 or 3 years, a long-standing, century-long standing tradition can be turned on its head. Is there that existential risk which exists for banks today?
I think, Udayan, don't look at it as banks or non-banks. Look at it as financial intermediation, a way by which a customer's needs of savings, investing, spending, and borrowing are met. And if you take that lens and move away from thinking about yourself as this regulated, protected, cushioned institution to an institution which is in the business of service, providing an intermediation and a customer experience facility for what a customer needs in day-to-day life. Saving, investing, borrowing, spending, and the mechanism of payments is a way to achieve that. And just focus relentlessly on customer and the customer needs. It does not matter whether you're a bank or a non-bank. It's about how you do it for that customer and do it relentlessly. I think the opportunity and the scale is huge, and it is going to be a concentrated play. You're not going to have too many players sustain this huge change in the world where I think basically few winners take it all.
Yeah, winners are indeed taking it all. But you spoke about risk management, and I want to ask you about how important that lesson has been in negotiating the very choppy waters of the COVID-induced times that we live in. I mean, how do you think Indian banks will come out of it? I mean, given your own experience with the retail loan book and the SME loan book, and what level of impairment you may have seen, and what your expectations are on how we'll finally come out of this, with what level of non-performing assets?
COVID has done a few things in terms of turning things on their head. It has disproportionately separated the larger players and people having access to capital from the smaller players who do not have that easy access to capital. The haves and have-nots have been defined by availability of the capital window. Therefore, even if you are in a stressed sector, if you have access to capital, particularly equity capital, you have a much greater chance of surviving. And if you don't, the chances are you will find it extremely difficult to sustain through this period, particularly in the stressed sectors. The second thing which COVID has done has disproportionately changed the bottom of the pyramid's future. A lot more people have got below what I would call as the subsistence levels, and a few people are getting disproportionate concentration. It has very serious implications for the socio-economic, political agenda of the world, and faster businesses, including new and old generation businesses, figure this out, the better it is. Or else we will have a very serious challenge to this whole divide, which is happening very, very dramatically in front of our eyes.
Absolutely. I mean, one couldn't agree with you more, Uday. But do you have a solution? Because you are very solution oriented as a person. I've seen that over decades. If you were, I mean, you've outlined the problem beautifully. Could you now suggest something that can be done to bridge this divide? I mean, if you were in the role, in the shoes of policymakers, what would you say that this needs to be done to avert a socio-economic crisis?
I will divide it across two separate lenses, which finally integrate but have a different way of looking at things. First is what I call as the lens of geography is history. COVID has basically broken barriers. You and I can interact and speak with each other like never before, even if we are at two different parts of the world. Same is happening across the world. I see a huge opportunity for India and Indians to be able to not only be improving in the whole area of manufacturing, but even more so in the area of, say, the office. India can genuinely be the front and the back office of the entire world. And Indians can really be part of, say, a Google, sitting in India and servicing customers across the world. Therefore, geography is history is a very powerful message which has come in the post-COVID era. As an extension of that, it changes the famous Indian rural-urban divide. I can be in the smallest village of India, and I'm connected not only to the rest of India, but also the world. And that changes the dynamics of how I can create opportunity for people across the length and the breadth of India, serving India, Indians, and the rest of the world. And what enormous job opportunity it creates. It creates much better balanced regional growth and changes the perspective on the future of growth. However, let's take the separate lens. Three areas are where I think India needs to be significantly stepping up on the game. First is education and skilling. We need it at a scale and size to understand how this digital native or the technology oriented world is going to change the perspective for every one of us. And what are we going to do to provide this kind of skilling and learning across India? And it is not about school buildings. It's about the software. It's about the teachers. It's about education online combined with some physical ability to get interaction and social interaction. So education and skilling needs massive change to be creating new jobs for people. Second is healthcare. We have dramatically underspent in healthcare. We're going to see huge advancement in biotechnology and the whole area of healthcare. We are spending about 1.3% of GDP. We should increase it to 3% of GDP. So whole healthcare area and initiatives around that is the second big change. And third, we are underestimating the risk of climate change. And I said we are moving to a new planet post-COVID. And climate change is a part of the change which business, industry, and society will have to get much faster. It will create new opportunities. What looks like high costs for existing businesses will become a necessity. And we must move on climate change much faster, because if we don't, we should not land up in another COVID-like crisis where we are going to take action at short notice. I'm sitting here in Mumbai. I read a report yesterday that Bombay's water level is going up uh, in the foreseeable future. What are we going to do about it? Do we want to wait for the crisis to hit us or make the change now? And COVID has taught us speed is crucial when a crisis hits you. And I would rather recommend speed before the crisis hits us. And therefore, the two planes are geography is history, embrace the new world, absorb and make the change happen in our lives, which will create jobs and livelihood, and focus on things like education and skilling, healthcare, and sustainability for a different future for our planet.
Okay, fair points. Now, I want to bring the discussion back a little bit to how the banking system will fare post-COVID. You alluded to the fact that it's actually separated the men from the boys. Does that open up opportunities for Kotak Mahindra Bank? Because you've always been very clear about using the inorganic route to expand the bank. Whenever opportunities have come up, you have taken them. But do you think a lot of the weekend banks could be up for grabs in the next year or so? I mean, the government itself is trying to sell two public sector banks. Do you think that will go through, and would Kotak Mahindra Bank be an interested party if and when that happens?
So then, first of all, as I said, I'm more excited today for the future, even more so than my 35 years journey, because I see a whole new world of opportunity. There are new challenges, new issues to address, but through that, opportunity never knocks at the door when it comes. It always comes unannounced, and it's after you sort of passed it, you realize whether you grabbed it or lost it. And at Kotak, fortunately for us, we have come into COVID extremely light. We were well prepared for the shocks. We obviously did not know COVID, but pre-COVID also the economy had slowed down a bit. Therefore, we had kept a lot of our powder dry. We are today at a capital adequacy of about 23-24%, which is probably highest, certainly with reference to Indian banking in general. And we see this powder dry with a structural change in our future coming at a much faster rate as an opportunity to grow in the way forward. The good news is today we understand the positives and the risks out of COVID much better than we understood them 15 or 16 months ago. Therefore, you have a handle on how do you manage the risk around COVID? God forbid, should there be a wave 3 which hits us. So we are in a much better position going forward. We are certainly growing we will grow at a faster clip, certainly on the organic side. And on the inorganic side, we are very open. As I said, our focus is getting more customers, building a franchise, going out there and providing solutions for customers and managing risk. Whatever opportunity which comes for achieving these objectives are something which we will certainly look at, but very difficult to say whether it'll be opportunity A or B or C. All that I can say, we have our powder dry. We are quite hungry for opportunity in a fast changing world, and we will try and get it both organically and, if so appropriate, inorganically.
But specifically on those public sector banks, do you think that the government will have success? Will there be a lot of interested parties to buy the two banks that they're lining up to sell? Would you consider it? Because you know all these banks quite well. Do you think that's an opportunity or could potentially be?
We will keep an open mind, Udayan. Difficult to say how it goes, what shape it takes. But at this stage, I can certainly tell you that we will keep an open mind to opportunity of different kinds which will come our way.
Okay. But, last year there was talk about you talking to IndusInd Bank and later it was denied. Could you now that so much time has passed, could you tell us if that indeed was on the discussion table and why you chose to walk away if indeed you were talking to the Hindujas?
Udayan, it's always better to let sleeping dogs lie.
Okay, I won't be able to draw you into that. But let me ask you a little bit about, since you spoke about the state of the economy and the scarring by COVID, what do you make of what is going on in the stock market today? I mean, every week it hits new highs. A lot of people are left scratching their heads, but it just continues to climb higher. Are you a believer in this rise? Are you a skeptic?
I am a believer in new pockets of value which are happening in the marketplace and the economy. The tough one is, are the price points high or low? And let me give you one example. And I'm not justifying the present valuations by giving this example. I'm just making a point. I recollect, maybe it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago, whenever it was, Facebook getting listed. And there was a lot of skepticism around Facebook. And Facebook was listed at $30 billion valuation. And people were saying, this is too high, this is crazy, people don't know what they're buying, where is the revenue model? Today, Facebook is $1 trillion company. So it's always dangerous to say what is high and what is not. We are seeing certain trends about how a certain level of engagement and interaction with the customer world, which happens, creates potential revenue streams, some of them not even imagined at the point of time when the model may have been built. The question is that unlike what was true 10 or 15 years ago, we are seeing a lot of players come in at the same time and wanting to get a piece of the action. And I go back to the counter example, which is the example of electricity when it was originally invented. Electricity changed our world. It was one of the biggest inventions we have ever seen. And many, many players rushed into the business of electricity and generation of electricity. The stock markets of those days valued some of those companies at astronomical levels. Electricity is a part of our life more than 100, 150 years later. But those companies who were hugely valued at that point of time, most of them or almost all of them do not exist. Therefore, there is no given that a transformative change necessarily creates sustainable corporations. You also got the counter example of companies like Facebook, which have been able to move from an area of skepticism to huge revenue and sustainability. So you've got both the examples on each side. And therefore, my view is there will be some companies which will be the defining companies of the future. For those, we need to identify which of those will play the marathon game and get past the initial hurdles of euphoria. Second is a lot of the companies on the way will fail. And third is even the companies which succeed, the big question is the price point of the market appropriate for future value or not? And the answer to that is like a crystal ball gazing. You do not have the correct answers. But I must say, not all the companies which are rushing and which are going into markets and the markets are absorbing at a frantic pace, both in the public markets and the private markets, not all of them will succeed. And if I were a betting man, I would say a very small percentage of them will be around 5 to 7 years from now.
So would you go as far as to say that you spot some kind of a bubble in the IPO market today?
No, bubble is something which is a very dangerous word. What I can say is at this point of time, with huge amount of liquidity, alternative returns being at record lows. In the Indian context, you're getting 3 to 4% on your deposits today. So any option which is at a potential hurdle higher than this rate of interest is automatically drawing money from savers and investors into that opportunity. All that I would like to say is, please keep in mind, one is to say I'm getting a low return of 3 to 4%. The second is in the low return of 3 to 4% per annum, your 100 rupees is protected. So when you're taking a bet of an alternative investment, you're not betting just about getting higher returns than the 3 to 4%. You're betting about the safety of the 100 rupees. It is possible the 100 rupees may become 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. But you should be ready to take a view that 100 rupees can become zero as well. And that is the call which investors should be made aware of. And I think we need to ensure that investor is made savvy enough to be aware of the risks, particularly the retail investors who are a little bit like the Pied Piper with very low alternative returns.
What about cryptocurrencies, Uday? Have you thought about that? I'm sure you have. Would you buy
Yeah,
Bitcoin yourself?
Udayan, we have to ask ourselves a simple question. Why do investors around the world buy gold? It doesn't create value. It does not, it's not productive. It's just some lump of yellow metal. It has built trust over the years. You go back to history, currency issuance was linked to gold standard. Why were governments around the world having a concept of how much currency you could issue linked to an unproductive yellow metal called gold? Because that was what was the store of value and trust. So, whether it's Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, we are today in a world where sovereign governments, and let us take the example of US. You can print away merrily because you're a reserve currency. Finally, what is the US dollar when it is printed? It's a piece of paper which suddenly gets value. So when you create so much of paper around the world and you flood the world with paper, something has to give. And that something is going to be asset values over time, which is exactly what is happening. But as you keep on printing more and more, you reach a point where you want a store of value. And whether a cryptocurrency can reach that point of trust across people, across countries, across generations, and can also meet the requirements of it not being used for the dark world. I think cryptocurrency as a electronic equivalent of gold or digital gold, as people say, can be an alternate asset class. But for that, I think nation states, sovereign governments will have to figure out how they're going to control this, especially when many of these countries have lost control over their own printing presses for currency.
You wouldn't write it off, cryptocurrencies yet, like a lot of people do. I mean, they scoff at it. You are not that skeptical.
I'm not writing off the cryptocurrency because people need a good answer in the world to relentless printing of money. And at this point of time, the only answer which has
Okay.
sustained over time has been gold.
Sure. You spoke about digital disruptions and how banks and other financial entities need to reinvent themselves. I want to ask along the same lines about online broking, because it seems like traditional brokers, and Kotak Mahindra Bank has a successful brokerage as well. They seem to be facing the heat from online discount brokerages who are grabbing more and more market share with every passing month. How do you see this equation panning out over time?
So I have to first really give credit to a lot of the online brokers who have done a phenomenal job in expanding the market for investors in this new age. And they've done an awesome job just using technology and making it feasible for every individual to go out and be a part in the stock market. It's a great thing to happen. The thing I would want to also caution at the same time is that at times online brokerages tend to run the risk of giving a lot of inducement for more trading by traders and investors. We have to be careful there because we are currently in the middle of a raging bull market. You do not want a situation where we've got many Indians who have come into the stock markets over the last 12 to 24 months, who have experienced the joy of investing versus other forms of saving. You do not want a situation that, God forbid, at some point of time, if there is a shake-up in the equity markets, these savers lose confidence and go away. Therefore, my advice to every securities firm, including online brokers, is nurture the saver. This is one of the finest things happening to India, where Indian savings are going for productive capital formation to build this country, whether it is startups or whether it is infrastructure or large companies. It is crucial we nurture these savers and we think beyond our day-to-day quick buck, which we may make, into a sustainable ability to keep on getting more and more savers, diversifying their portfolio, and coming into productive parts of the economy.
Okay, we're coming to close to the end of the show there, and I want to ask you a few personal questions. So many people look up to you in the business world. Who do you look up to? I mean, who have you always had as your mentors or spiritual guides in the world of business, close associates and friends? Could you give us some names?
I can think of two people. One was a gentleman called Mr. Sidney Pinto. He was the one who's pioneered merchant banking in India. And he was the first person who effectively joined me when I started my career. Solid in law, strong foundations and fundamentals. And he gave the right moorings for building a substantive approach to life and work. And I have to credit him. The second person in that same spirit, actually even before Mr. Pinto, is a gentleman who's a very successful investor in the Indian market called Professor Shivanand Mankekar. I did my MBA from Jamnalal Bajaj, and Professor Mankekar used to take a subject called corporate finance. In the first session of his, he blew all our theories and highlighted the importance of cash flows in sustainable growth. And I still remember going to the stock market for the first time along with him, as he often used to do after his lectures at Bajaj. And that actually was one of the finest lessons I've got from Professor Mankekar. And of course, I have got many other people who have done significantly in the journey. And amongst that, the one person which I also have to certainly thank for is my friend Anand Mahindra, who had the courage and conviction to lend the name of his family in the very early stages of our journey as a firm. And that was a very important thing. And I do care about my relationship with Anand as well. So these are some of the people who have meant a lot to me.
Mm. Is Anand still, he always speaks very highly of you at every forum where he's asked about you there. Would you say it's a business relationship because it is Kotak Mahindra Bank at the end of the day, or would you classify that as a friendship?
I classify it very much as a friendship.
Great. I also want to ask you about whether you've thought about your own life beyond 2024, because things may change. But as things stand today, you will probably have to step down in December 2023. And it's not as if you'll be 80 years old then. You'll be barely in your mid-60s, which in these days is fairly young for an entrepreneur. What would your life be like if you did step down? Have you thought about it?
I think there comes a point of time where every manager has to think about his role and appropriateness of his role for the future. I will be close to 65 around that time. And I think in my capacity as the CEO or the MD, I have to ask the tough question about my continuation as CEO for a fast changing world and a faster changing institution. And I do believe that Kotak is in very sound footing. We have great talent within, and we have ability to access talent from external sources. And therefore, I have no doubt that Kotak will be able to sustain its journey for a long, long time. Of course, I am not in the same position where just because I may step down as CEO, I have no connection with the bank. I continue to have the ability of being on the board of the bank as per the current regulations as well. And therefore, I don't think that is an issue. And what's most important for me is in the journey of Kotak and myself, beyond 2024 for a long, long time, it is culture, it's governance, it's ability to change, it is entrepreneurship, and it's about building an institution which will make India proud. And that is really what I consider as a sustainable legacy, which I would love to be a part of and the journey. And there is lots to do in life. It's, I mean, I would really like to see how life takes me beyond 65. The world is an oyster with huge amount of opportunity, but Kotak will always be a part of my heart.
Of course, how could it not? But uh, do you think you would find some time to go back to your sitar?
I wish I could, Udayan, if you could go to the hills. I think I can also think differently, I hope.
Well, you could, but you, unlike me, you have all those billions to take care of, Uday. Have you thought about that? What would you do? I mean,
You
you're
know,
so
my
enormously wealthy now. They say you're the world's richest banker. Have you
Udayan,
thought about it?
Udayan, let me just step back and say, I don't think the pleasure is in accumulation. The pleasure is in the journey and the pleasure of making things happen, of building an institution which would be global scale, size, and quality, and has the ability to change with the times. Think about American institutions. Think about a JP Morgan. Mr. JP Morgan is long dead and gone, but JP Morgan, the institution, continues to be probably the largest banking institution in the world. Think about institutions like Goldman Sachs, with whom we had partnered once upon a time. They are all family names. The original family members and individuals may not be there, but institutions have sustained. And finally, the real test of individuals is how well are you able to create institutions which, in my context, would make India proud.
Well, you've built an institution, Uday, that I'm sure everyone in the business world is very proud of, and you yourself, I'm sure, are very proud of. Keep doing the great job you're doing and keep inspiring thousands of entrepreneurs across the country as you always have. I wish you all the best, Uday, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you. My best wishes to you for the journey ahead.
Thank you, Udayan, and great to see you. Goodbye.